is Nisreen's Art World. In this podcast, I will share my thoughts about different art forms such as films, books, paintings, performing art, etc. Hello, this is Nisreen. Welcome to the 14th episode of my podcast. It's lovely to speak to you again. This time, I'd love to talk about an insightful book I ordered from Japan called 日本に導かれた運命 or A Tryst with Destiny in Japan. It is a biography written by the first Indian-descendant politician in Japan, Mr. Yogendra Puranik. I wanted to introduce this book to everybody because it poses an important question. How can we create a society where ethnically and nationally diverse people happily live together? The book is in Japanese, and the English version is expected to be published as well. I learned about this book through a social media post by a classical Indian dance Mohiniyattam performer from Japan, Hiromi Maruhashi. First, who is Yogendra Puranik? His life history is one of the most interesting ones I've ever encountered. He's from Ambernath, a small village in western India. He studied in Japan in the late 1990s. After finishing his university education in India, he migrated to Japan in 2003 and established a career as an IT businessman. He eventually initiated various volunteer works and the restaurant business as a cultural bridge between migrants and local people. With the extension of these social activities, he became an Edogawa Award Council member in Tokyo in 2019. In 2023, he also took over as a state school headmaster. He is also a single father to a son whose mother is Chinese. I'd love to list 3 points that make this book insightful in the global sense. 1. It shows reality from an immigrant's point of view. The initial chapters about Mr. Puranik's early days in a small village in western India are fresh and warm, with lots of cultural anecdotes. On the other hand, in the later chapters, where he lives in Japan, Mr. Puranik provided sharp analysis and humorous insights into his busy life as an immigrant businessman, a social worker, and the father of a non-Japanese child growing up in Japan. It draws a realistic view of modern Japan we rarely find in the mainstream media in English. Many people, especially in the West, assume Japan is a homogeneous Zen wonderland, as shown in some anime. In reality, Japanese society is as complex as any society, though it is true that collectivism is highly valued. Furthermore, the population of immigrants in Japan, especially Tokyo, is rising. According to the website of Japan's Immigration Service Agency, Tokyo has 663,362 non-Japanese residents. This is 11.3% higher compared to the year before. Unfortunately, the way the Japanese government is handling cultural diversity is far from great. For example, Mr. Puranik states the difficulties he witnessed in the immigrant community, such as a poor Japanese language support for non-Japanese children in schools, a lack of vegetarian options, or an absence of assistance for foreign residents when northern part of Japan was hit by the earthquake in 2011. It was particularly heartbreaking for me to read the part where his ex-wife from China was treated poorly by the immigration service in Japan and she ended up being traumatized. 2. It emphasizes the importance of courage and compassion. Despite all the obstacles he faces, pessimistic is the least suitable word for this book. It's incredible to read how he takes actions to improve the situation for people around him. For example, the public housing where he lived had a large population of Indian workers. Many of them were facing a language barrier and difficulty in understanding different cultural expectations in everyday life. He started supporting them and answering questions via social media and email for free. He even opened a computer workshop for elderly residents. I found the compassion and patience towards other people that allowed him to become the cultural bridge between the two countries truly admirable. I also loved the bit where he opened a Western Indian home-style restaurant with his mother in Tokyo and didn't include naan on the menu despite knowing they are very popular in Japan. According to him, naans are not very healthy and not a major part of genuine Indian home meals. And a little coincidence, I realized that I had visited his restaurant once, around a decade ago. I remember that the meal was very tasty. Finally, point 3. It suggests an integrative model of multicultural society. Mr. Puranik suggests 3 keys to the harmonious and diverse community: self-support, co-support, public support. Self-support meaning immigrants' effort to learn the Japanese language, socialize with Japanese people, and stimulate with the Japanese cultural habits. Co-support refers to attempts to mix different cultural groups and join various activities together. And public support indicates systemic support by the government and embassies to fulfill the diverse immigrants' demands in medical, educational, legal settings, etc. I believe this model is applicable to any multinational society. In addition, the part where he turned down the idea of establishing a little India or an India town in Tokyo truly resonated with me. He suspected that establishment of a separate town would only deepen cultural and economic alienation of Indian immigrants in Japan. He emphasizes importance of living in harmony, not having an isolated community. This is true even in a huge immigrant country like the United States. He also points out how India towns in the US and UK often suffer from poverty or poor education levels. This argument also made me think of my own personal experience. I live in a university town in the US where many international students live. On the surface, it appears to be extremely diverse, with lots of cultural events and activities. I've also heard that language support for immigrant children at local schools is quite thorough as well. In that sense, the level of public support appears to be generally much higher than similar sized towns in Japan. However, every time I join cultural local events, I realize how rare it is to see interactions between different ethnic groups at those events, especially at Asian themed ones. The whole idea of community appears to be fixated on the idea of small ethnic categorizations instead of harmony as one big community. I am not saying that having a solid sense of group identity is a negative thing. The US is especially a country of immigrants and a nation that has suffered a long history of racial inequality. It is impossible to ignore a person's ethnic background. I'm just saying it would be even more wonderful if we can foster co support much more and eliminate the sense of division among groups. In terms of diversity and inclusion, the world still has a long way to go. But we can be hopeful as long as we can have compassion to another human next to us, as this book suggested. What did you think? I'd be delighted if you write a review of this podcast on Apple Podcasts or rating on Spotify. It would be lovely if you share this episode on social media as well. And of course, you're more than welcome to let me know your thoughts from the contact form in the description. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye for now.